Hey everyone, just quick announcement before I share today's episode with Calvin Johannsen. Calvin has an inspiring story and is doing some amazing work, and I'm just excited for him to get to share that with you guys. But just want to take a minute to share the release of my first children's book of my Healthy Children's Book series called Maddox's Trip to the Chiropractor. It's a cute book with bright pictures that follows a toddler on her trip to the chiropractor. It shows her excitement and how she knows it impacts her health in a positive way. And each purchase of the book will be supporting a project that I started called the Unlock Wellness Project. For each purchase of the book, we will be donating a wellness bag to a child in need. These wellness bags will include non-toxic, chemical-free essentials such as soap, shampoo, toothpaste, a toothbrush, items that a lot of the time children in tough situations don't have access to. We're also going to be shipping wellness bags to flood victims in Houston, Texas, and reaching out to victims of Hurricane Irma and Hurricane Maria as well. You can learn more about the book and about the Unlock Wellness Project by going to drkaseyjohnson.com. That's DRKASEY Johnson.com. Click on the Shop tab, then click on the Children's Book option. You'll be able to read a short description and even watch a short video with more information. You can also purchase the book directly on Amazon.com by searching Maddox's Trip to the Chiropractor. But I hope you guys loved the book. Be sure to check out my website to learn more, and thank you so much for the support. But now it's time for today's episode. I hope you love my conversation with Calvin Johannsen. Welcome to the Unlock Wellness Podcast. I'm Dr. Casey and excited for today's guest. I'm here with Calvin Johannsen. And I was connected to Calvin through my friend Chris Ward, who is actually on episode 53 of the podcast. So definitely go check out Chris's episode as well. He's amazing. But he was like, you have to check out my friend Calvin. He's so inspiring. And Calvin went on a journey to summit the 100 tallest mountains in the United States called the 14ers Project. So I'm excited to hear about his journey with that project, as well as another project that he's been working on called the Join 100 Club, which helps people achieve their goals through the power of consistency. But Calvin, thank you so much for taking time to come on. I'm super excited to have you and just to hear your story.
Casey, thank you for having me. I should have you be a spokesperson for my projects because you sum them up and say them much more eloquently than I do.
I appreciate that. But Calvin, why don't you just kind of jump into your backstory? You know, what really led you on the journey to even want to attempt to climb the 100 tallest mountains? Because that's a pretty big goal. And, what just led you to even want to do that in the first place?
Yeah. So when I kind of backstory of a lofty goal of 100 mountains is quite incredible. And some people can't fathom it. Myself this day, looking back a year ago, I feel like a disconnect, like that was a comic book hero and there's no way I did that. Right. But right. Going out to when I did the 100 Mountain Project, like all things, you don't just wake up one day and you're like, I'm going to go climb 100 mountains. Maybe some people do, not me. And that my story had actually started years prior. And it was like the little things of kind of like the butterfly effect of you do one little thing, which just starts to get the ball rolling. It starts to build momentum. And then throughout the years from doing one event to the next, it's kind of like, all right, I think physically and mentally I'm in a space where I can try on this bigger challenge for myself. So last summer, I was looking at, one to shake things up. I had been working professionally for 7 years, being self-employed, and kind of always lived in the same city. And I was just looking to shake things up. And I had kind of this audacious goal of to go out and climb every mountain above 14,000 feet in the contiguous USA, so lower 48. And that started with, it's kind of a thing to do in Colorado, in which, depending who you ask, officially and unofficially, there's 58 of them. So I figured, well, if I'm going to go do that, how many more exist in the lower 48? And of the 14ers, again, on the list that I was using, there's some discrepancies based on some mountaineering lingo as far as what identifies. But I found a list of 75 official and unofficial total 14ers. So there was, I hope my math is correct, there was 58 in Colorado, 15 more in California, and 2 up in Washington, which is 2 different summit points on Mount Rainier. And along that journey, about halfway through of completing the 14ers project, which was those 75 mountains, I was probably 3/4 of the way through. I just felt I was feeling incredible, and I was like, you know what? Why not go a little bit further? Like I could almost be done with this, or I could be halfway done. I think it was around, mountain 50 or something. I was like, I could be done here shortly, or I could only be halfway done. And I don't know, it just felt right that I was never going to be in this position again in my life as far as 100 mountains in 100 days. So,
right. I mean, you're never going to have that you could have the opportunity, but more than likely, like, this is a once in a lifetime experience for you.
Yeah, most likely. I'd put in half the work already, so it's going to be a whole lot more work to try and redo it. And really, it was just I kind of pulled up the remaining list of the 25, and it actually turned out that the remaining 25 were going to be in the same area in California that I was still headed to, and kind of back in Colorado where I had to go back anyways for a couple mountain pickups. So logistically, I was like, you know what? Like these are all still in the same kind of the region, same areas. So since it's not any different, more states or more technical stuff, I think I'll just go for it.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, your initial goal was just so big. So it's just like, why not? And I love that you had that mindset to just like push yourself even further. Because I think having that kind of mindset, and I mean, with any type of goal, I mean, it just takes you further than what you could have ever imagined, right?
Yeah. And so with the goal of, and I kind of want to backpedal a little bit to give people a more of an understanding of kind of what happens before this big event. Again, it's you don't become an overnight sensation, overnight success overnight. Mm-hmm. Really, it's the decade prior. And my kind of journey, I always attribute back to around 2013. I think 2012, 2013, one day I kind of woke up and the last 4 years of life had really gotten to me. I put on a little bit of extra weight. I was like 50 pounds heavier. I was just not the person who I was the rest of my life as far as teenage and college years. Right post-college, I had a really sedentary lifestyle. I just wasn't active anymore. And after a few years of that, I wake up one day and here I am, 50 pounds, a bit heavier, like out of touch with who I am. And so I started to get back on a journey of wanting to get a bit healthier, a little bit more better well-being. Mm-hmm. And I just started doing more running, kind of more exercising, started to eat better. And that journey led me to an opportunity to go climb Mount Kilimanjaro over in Tanzania, Africa, which is one of the 7 summits. It's the tallest mountain in Africa. And from that point on, I decided to try to run my first half marathon, which then went into my first marathon. And then I ran a few more marathons. I started doing some adventure races. They're like multidisciplined as far as like biking, hiking, running, or canoeing. So it was just really building up my physicality and mindset. And I'd climbed some mountains, like 10 of them throughout like a 4-year period or so. And I was just like, well, I kind of have an idea of what this would take. I've had a taste of it. So let's just give it a go. Like, why not? Right.
Like, it wasn't impossible because you've put yourself in, not as extreme situations, but still kind of, touched upon it. Like, that first initial, you said you had that first opportunity to go, where was it? Africa? Is that what you said?
Yep.
Yeah. Was that because like you had a group of friends that were into that and that just invited you, or like, how did that even, because that's a big trip as well. So, I mean, how did that opportunity even come about?
It was. And that was actually my first international trip. So a very monumental moment in my life for a few different reasons. But I do video production for a living. I have a business called Visual House, and we do online marketing videos and short micro documentaries kind of style work. And a friend of a friend had a group called Peak for Poverty, which it was a husband and wife duo had started this. And they're actually from Tanzania, but they lived in Des Moines, Iowa now. And their whole mission was they would do local stateside hikes and group trips. And once a year, they'd do a big Mount Kilimanjaro climb, and all proceeds goes back to fund some mission work they do in Tanzania, which is providing secondary education to certain orphanages. Nice. So I decided I wanted to try to travel internationally, but also be part of a cool project. So I went with the two founders, and we went over to Tanzania, and I spent 5 weeks there of traveling around, kind of staying in a few of these orphanages, shooting video, kind of documenting it so that way we could help with their mission efforts, like with fundraising and trips and things. So really got to have experience of taste at life. And then part of that was I got to go climb then Kilimanjaro.
Right. How much did you think like that trip really, I mean, having to see a lot of the situation that you had to, especially with the kids, like, do you think that really fueled your motivation to push yourself? Like, do you think that had an impact on like the rest of your goal setting just from then on out?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that you are who you are in life because of the experiences that you've had, from the experiences and the conversations that you've encountered in your life. So for me to go for my first trip out of the country to, for the most part, third world, a developing country, and you get landed in Dar es Salaam, which, it's kind of a bit more modern. It's a bigger city, up and coming, but still pretty rough. But then we got way out in the rural areas where you're in these like small villages. And it made things real, and it did have an impact as far as a very humbling experience. Here I am, like you can see these things in photos and magazines and read articles and watch movies and videos. And that's one way to have a connection with something possibly. But to have a firsthand experience is just so much more. So being there, being in these circumstances where you're living in an orphanage where these kids were given nothing, started with nothing, and comparatively for the lifestyle that I live now, what I'm accustomed to in the United States, they still have nothing. However, there they are bonded together from their beginnings, and they have so much unshakable joy to them and so much enthusiasm, optimism, and yet they have very little. And it just showed me, it helped reinforce I'm quite grateful and the sense of gratitude that I have, but also just very humble, and that knowing and seeing and experience that the world's a very big place, and your world is your reality in that sense. And just, it did have an impact on me. And then getting to do Mount Kilimanjaro, which isn't necessarily a technical climb, but it is a strenuous 7-day event. And, it gives you that momentum and confidence of being in those things that pushes the ball further down the hill and picks up momentum.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I mean, that's an amazing experience for sure. Like that I'm sure that you'll kind of implement into everything that you do forever. And, just to kind of backtrack to the, we were talking about the 100-day project. So whenever you decided like that you're going to go for it, you're going to do it. And like, where did you go from then? Like, did you just start contacting people, or just start making a huge game plan? Or did you like, how soon from like the initial, I'm going to do it, to when you actually just jumped in and did it?
Yeah. Was this back to the 100-day mountain climbing thing?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So the idea had been planted and maybe Chris Ford and I were talking one day, the gentleman you introduced with, and maybe he planted the seed. I'm not sure, but Chris he took me on my first 14er hike climb in Colorado back in, it was actually 6 months before Kilimanjaro. So back in 2012, like August of 2012. And at this point, I was in a little bit better shape than I had been. I was on the trending down as far as weight size and trending up as far as wellness. And he took me out to Colorado, and we hiked the two tallest mountains there, Mount Massive and Mount Elbert. And it was just a very incredible experience for me to actually go west, spend time in Colorado, get out in nature, and do something physically I'd never got to encounter before. It was very strenuous. It was very hard because like the shape and out of touch, no experience with it, so to speak. And somewhere along the way, like we had talked more about 14ers, and usually people in Colorado, if you're into hiking big mountains, you may make it a life goal to summit all of them. So over, maybe a decade or 2 decades, you might go out to get all 58 of them.
Right.
I don't know, somewhere along the way we were joking like, man, wouldn't it be cool to just try and go for them all? Like one, there's some pretty crazy records out there. I wasn't going to go for any records, but it's just more of like, what if I just went and did one every single day? So that throughout the years, we joke about that, or just kind of talk about it. And about a year prior, 18 months prior, so let's just try to remember my timeline on top of my head. So last year's 2016, probably 18 months prior to that, I'd really started more considering. I was just feeling, again, a sense of wanting to shake things up, just, have a sabbatical, do something different. And I sat on, and then I would tell myself, no, I'm not going to do it. Like, it's too scary, or I don't really want to do it. And I went out one summer, and that was either that 18 months before, I think it was 2 years before. I went out to test the idea. So I went out and just going to spend a week hiking in Colorado with a buddy. We were going to do 7 mountains, so basically one a day. Mm-hmm. And we were coming down off that last mountain, and I vividly remember it. I was so tired. I was so sore. We got down to the bottom, we were leaving, and I was like, yeah, there's no way I'm ever going to go do this. Like, I know, as what I said, I was like, I don't need to do it. It's like, nah, I don't really want to do it. And what I realized, like, 6 months later from that moment, like, reflecting on it, was like, I was completely scared. I was so tired, so fatigued that I didn't believe in myself. And I was just scared. It's not that I didn't want to do it. I possibly want to do it. I was just scared.
Right. And you were scared because you didn't know how it would end up, right? Just kind of the fear of the unknown, and you don't know how sore or tired or like,
the exhausting.
Right. Most of these are probably going to be by yourself, right? And that's a factor.
Yeah. So then, I don't know. So we'll fast forward about 18 months. So we're about 6 months from actually doing the thing. And, I was still kicking around, like, am I going to do it? Not going to do it. And then 3 months prior, I decided to do it. And I was like, you know what? I'm doing this. So I started quickly researching. I grabbed like an itinerary, started plotting them out. And it scared me because I was like starting to research some of these bigger mountains, like more technical stuff. I was like, this is at like scamping over cliffs and stuff. I'm like, this is frightening. I'd be researching on my computer and my palms just like covered in sweat.
YouTubing, like, you're like YouTubing, like how to scale the cliff of a side of a mountain.
Yeah. And I'm just like, I don't know if I can do that, because I've never been to something like that. But I was like, you know what? I'm just going to power of naivety. I'm just going to go with it. So I had a list. I got a car and just like researched car camping and stuff, and basically just hit the open road and was just like, well, I know worst case, my goal was 75 and 75. So do all the 14ers in 75 days, roughly one a day. Although some days you summit multiple ones because you can link them together. So I'd have some rest days in there, but I had a loose itinerary. And I just hit the road and was like, I've got a list. And if I don't get it done 75 days, I'm still going to keep going until hopefully I can get the list done. So I just hit the road, and I just focused on one a day. Like that was a lesson throughout the project was if I would think too far ahead, like think about tomorrow or the next week, like if weather moves in, if I can't get this done, then how are you going to do this? Or how I need to find partners to do Mount Rainier. Am I going to get a permit to do Mount Whitney? Like all this stuff gets in your head. And I was like, none of that stuff matters if I don't climb this mountain today that's in front of me on my list, because I still have to do this mountain. So it was like, I would just zoom it all the way back down and say, nothing matters. My only goal right now is getting to the summit. And once I get to the summit, then my next goal is just getting back to my car. So once I zoomed it down, and it was amazing. Once I got out of my head and I physically got back in my body, just got in my car and started walking, like that's what mattered every day. And it's like, it's a big lesson for life. Like, again, don't get caught up in the big picture. Just focus on little things every single day. But here's a monumental task in front of me every single day to climb one mountain, let alone 100. But the only way I was going to get to 100 or 75 and then get to 100 was to do the one that I had to do that day. So like, forget about all the other ones. Just focus on the task at hand.
Right. And I mean, and just doing that, like you were saying, it really, I mean, I can't imagine how much you've learned, like just about yourself and like what you're capable about. Like, everybody has their own, like, cliche that sounds, their own mountain to climb, right? And it's just focusing at the task at hand and not getting distracted by all those outside voices and like whatever those are, whether it's social media or friends or family. I mean, they're all day. Like you just have to stay like laser focused on what you're trying to achieve and just deal with that. But have like the macro goal in set. Obviously, you had that goal of like 75, then 100. But still, it doesn't matter. Like you still have to zoom in on that. Okay, it's one mountain a day, and that's it.
Yeah, and that's completely what it was. And again, like I didn't in the very beginning, it was still hard. I remember for the first getting to like mountain 21 was still hard, and it felt like mountain 30s when things started to change because like I was so sore and like my body those times like it it would have benefited from having off days or getting some probably physical therapy or some massaging and more yoga and stuff. But it was like not my itinerary. It's like, I have to keep going. Like, I'll try to do what I can do the best. And people are like, this is stupid. You're going to get hurt. I'm just like, hey, I'm listening to my body. I'm trying to be smart, but I'm going to have some uncomfortableness. And I just got to keep going through that. That's like that's when the mentality comes in, right? It's the whole like adage that the mind will give up 99% of the time before the body ever does. Right?
Absolutely. Yep.
And so I remember though, like once I got to Mountain 30, which was Mountain Snowmass, I remember is I was just starting to feel good all of a sudden. It was like, I've now adapted. I'm acclimatized, so the altitude's not affecting me anymore. I'm getting faster. I'm getting leaner. I'm not getting as sore anymore. It just was like the sense of becoming a superhero. If like I was how it felt like if I was in a story, right? Like, but it makes sense. I was doing it every day. I was getting better. I was getting conditioned to the environment that I was in. And, you know, by the end of it, 3/4, like I was starting to make some incredible times going up, coming down and stuff that I wouldn't have been able to fathom when I first started.
What was an average time for, I was, wondering what that time frame would even look like.
Yeah. So, I'm trying an average time, like my average days were 10 to 15 hour days. So I'd say 12 hours days. That's one thing when I tell people the stories is usually a disconnect is they have no sense of the scale of what I might have done on a day, right? Most people aren't familiar with gaining 3,000 feet of elevation a day, or if I say 4,000, 6,000, like this those were foreign terms to me before I started.
Right.
The only way now, like, how do I say it? Like, an example would be a previous relationship I was in. I was explaining to her about this individual who's climbing the 7 summits and skiing the North and South Pole, and I was following his journey. I was just blown away with this accomplishment. But she had no sense of what it was. She's like, well, what does it take to like climb Mount Everest? Had no idea, right? So like, so me now back in Des Moines, I'll point out like we have in Iowa, the tallest building, which comparatively elsewhere in the nation, it's not that tall, but it's 600. I don't want to get this wrong. 500 to 600 feet or something, and 100 stories. And I would say it's essentially, and this still blows my mind. I look at that thing, which is tall, and you're on the ground, and I'm like, my average day was walking up like 6 of those, like a minimum, just like
it's crazy.
Oh my God, like crazy. And then, that was in my early days. And later on, like when I'd get to doing bigger mountains and stuff, and I'd have days where I'd do like 8, my biggest days were probably like 8 to 10,000 elevation in a day or something. So just like, doubling or tripling that. So, so my average days would be, I'd probably say like 12 hours always being out there if I was to average it down.
And for all of these, were you by yourself, or did you actually get a few people to join in on a few of them?
So I was inspired. One of my greatest favorite stories I share with people that really lit the fire for this project is the Iron Cowboy, known as the 50-50-50, which this guy, James, he did 50 Ironmans in 50 continuous days in all 50 states. And part of that, I guess, so yeah, lighting the fire, that I joined him a year prior on the marathon portion in Iowa. I hadn't done any marathon training at that point. I was way out of marathon shape, and it was 110-degree heat index or something in Iowa. But he was on day 43, and I thought, if this guy can make it to 43 days of doing Ironmans, which an Ironman is like I think it's 2.4 mile swim, 112-mile bike ride, and a 26.2 full marathon. You do that all. So 17 hours a day, he was out there doing this day after day after day, like doing. And to me, it's probably the greatest sports endurance feat ever accomplished.
Absolutely. I mean, you got to think like people will train like just for one of those things. You know what I mean? And just like, oh, okay, let's do all one day. Oh my gosh, that's amazing though.
Yeah. So I hope I'm not losing the original thread where we're going down. So
no, you're good.
I was out there and I was like, it was a brutal marathon. I walked like the last 4 or 5 miles. I was in so much pain, but I was like trying to get on his level. I was like, this guy deals with this all the time. Like, just get through. So, but the point is his journey was it was open. You could join him at any point. You could join him for any whole Ironman, any portion of the Ironman. And I joined him for the run. So same thing. I was like, I'm going to open my journey up. And anyone can join me. So I'd say on average, I bet half the time I was with somebody, and the other half I was alone, whether I had some friends meet up with me beforehand, or I'd met people out on the trails and the summits. I'd share my journey, and they would maybe join me for another mountain on my list. or I'd bump into people and just hike with them. But most part, it was, you get to learn a lot about yourself. You're out there alone quite a bit, which I'd never done anything like that, like a lot of alone time. And then let alone these very backcountry remote locations where dangerous things could happen and, help very far away.
What do you think was your biggest takeaway that you learned just from having that much time with just you and your own thoughts?
That's a good question. My biggest takeaway, and I don't know that it came from being alone, having thoughts, but it was just the whole encompassing of the whole entire project of how you accomplish something like that. Mm-hmm. And really, I got the same takeaway a year prior. And it was from a conversation when I was running with James, the Iron Cowboy. And my question to him was simple. I was like, James, how do you get out here and do this every day? And he goes, it's quite simple. He goes, I decided I'm going to do this. I made a decision. There is no choice. He goes, and I wake up in the mornings. Last thing I want to do is get in that pool and start swimming. He goes, but I made a decision. There's no choice. I removed the choice. My guys grab me and throw me in the pool, and I just start my day. And that little message was so powerful, but I had to go learn it on my own. The power of discipline, and that you don't necessarily, this helps for climbing 100 mountains, but this helps in like skill acquisition or accomplishing a project or just going for a walk or being a healthier person or better wellness. And that if you remove choice from your day and you make a decision, 100% commitment, things become a little bit easier because you have no out. Mm-hmm. But it's when you're kind of half in, half out, when you're tired, when you're not feeling it, whatever your excuse wants to be, you're going to opt for the easiest way out, which is usually to not do it. If I had given myself choice and didn't have that deadline and publicizing of trying to get to 100 and 100, then many times I would have been like, I'm just not doing it today because I'm so beaten down and sore and tired,
Right. No, that's amazing. And I love that. And it's just like, I mean, like you're saying, you could apply that to anything, but if you look at some of these like high endurance athletes or like, what you've had to train to accomplish your goals, nobody wants to wake up at 4 a.m. to run. Like people are like, oh, they're weird. They love that. Like, no, like nobody wants to get out of their warm bed, to go outside to run a marathon at 4 a.m. Like nobody wants to do that, but it's just making the decision that like, this is what I decided. Like it sucks now, but it's going to help me accomplish my goal. And like, it's what I want.
Yeah. It separates the doers from the do nots. Like as cliche as it sounds, it's a simple thing, but it's a practice. This reminds me of, say, yoga practice or meditation or anything. It's a practice. Like you may not get it right every day, but recognize when you don't get it right and then do something about it next time when you're put in that scenario again. For
sure. No, I love that. And so let's see. So like for all of the mountains that you did, what was probably, you said probably mountain, like the 30th one was probably your easiest, right? So what was the hardest one, or was that the easiest one?
I don't know that it was the easiest. It was one of my top 5 favorites. It's such a vivid memory. The hardest ones, there's 2 stories that instantly stick out. And this is like when I was super tested. One is our time on Mount Rainier was a 30-hour day with only about 2 hours of sleep. So that was really rough. But that prepared me for what would become my hardest journey, which if I didn't have that experience, I wouldn't have been able to do this next part, cliffhanger. So we're in California, which California is a little bit harder because the accessibility to the mountains aren't there as much as, say, Colorado has a lot of old forestry or mining roads. So you can get to the trailheads relatively quick. So you might have average elevation gain of 3,500 feet. Where in California, you're going from like way down around, you're going to do like 8,000 elevation gains, which you'll do. So you have to backpack into the high Sierras. And I was doing a big backpacking tour. So like a 5-day backpacking trip. Like you're going to spend all this time and energy going way up into the mountains. It's more efficient to just, bring a bunch of stuff with you and try to get them than like in and out, because that'd require even more work. So I had an ambitious plan. I'm trying to think. There was, I can't think. It starts with a J. I'm just make sure I'm counting my right hands. I think I had a 3-mountain plan, and I had my map and all this stuff that I was learning. And I was like, okay, I got this. Like, I had a partner with me who was doing some of his own kind of mountain stuff, but I got about 4 hours of sleep. I said, all right, here's the plan. He was going to take my sleeping gear and continue on down the trail because I was going to go out hit these 3 mountains the next day. Not carrying all my sleeping gear and stuff would make it lighter for me so I could move faster. And then I would pick up my sleeping gear on the way out. So I just wanted him to carry it down the trail like 2 hours or something, right? Mm-hmm. So he heads east, I head west. And I wake up, get about 3-4 hours of sleep, and I head off. I'm like, all right, my plan was I'm going to be back eating in town by noon, which is like really far away. I don't know what I was thinking. So a little over ambitious. So I take off, limited backpack and supplies, head out. By the time I get to my first mountain, I'm, 90 minutes behind or so. So I'm like, it's not the worst case, but let me head to the next one. So heading to Mount Stanford, I remember I could not find this thing. There's not a lot of information on these, and I'm struggling. And by the time I get to it and I find it, I'm at the base, or like the base for the part I'm going to start climbing up. And I'm like, crap, at this point it's 4:00, and I thought I was going to be doing this like at, 11 a.m. or something. So I'm 5 hours late at this point. So I remember I got to the top of it and climbed up it, climbed down it. And the moment I got down, I just was sat on a big rock, and I was really far away from the next mountain where I had to get to, the third mountain of the day. And I'm just watching the sunset. And I'm like, all right, well, I know I'm in for a really long night because I have no sleeping gear. And I have like a long sleeve and a jacket. So I'm not going to be really too comfortably warm. It's going to get cold, not like super freezing, but 40 to probably 40s or 50s, no sunlight. So I was watching this sunlight, and it was like coming to terms with your future of knowing that the next 12 hours are going to be brutal, 12, 15 hours, whatever it was. But I was like, you know what? I made it for 30 hours of not sleeping on like 2 hours with Mount Rainier, so I can do this. And so I won't go into the whole, well, I guess like quick details. So it was just like the blackest of skies. It was the opposite of like the full moon cycles, whatever you call that, like the darkest of dark. And which sucks. I can't see anything of where I'm going. All I have is headlights. All I can see is a little bit in front of me. So I'm thinking, well, in my head, I'm like, if I drop for every 1,000 feet of elevation I drop, it'll get 3 to 4 degrees warmer. So I'm thinking, if I drop 3,000 feet here, it can be anywhere to 6 to 8 degrees, or what's my math there? 9 to 12 degrees, right? Maybe I was only dropping like 2,000 to 3,000 feet down back into the tree line. Like I'll be down in the coverage, just be a little warmer. Like at least maybe I can snuggle up on a tree and get some sleep because I was super tired, and then get like sleep for a few hours, get the energy to continue on. So I go down there and I get like snuggled up, and I'm feeling pretty warm because I've been moving. I'm like, all right, this is going to work out really good. At this point, it's like 9:00 at night. So I fall asleep, and sharply at 9:20, I wake up freezing. So it's 20 minutes later, and I'm just like shaking cold.
Man.
And I'm like, shit, I have no choice but just to get up and move. And I know, and so now it's pitch black, and like I can't even see the next mountain I'm going to head to, which is pretty, dangerous in that sense, let alone like the obstacles where you're going to see when you're climbing up it. And usually like you have this thing called alpine starts, which means early starts, like maybe like 3 a.m. you're going to start going up a mountain, right? Mm-hmm. For the summit. But what happens is after a few hours going up, you start to get some kind of sunrise. The sunrises, you could see what you're walking up towards, so you can see obstacles and so on, right? But I knew the sun wasn't going to go up to like 6 a.m. and it's 9:20. And by the time I get to the mountain, maybe like 2 hours of hiking, I'm going to go up and down in complete pitch black. And I'm like, I don't know if it's the safest thing, but I also don't want to hike way back in here how many miles again and do this, like to come all the way back for this one.
Right.
So anyways, like it's just a constant struggle of like walking for an hour and then like, okay, I'm really tired and cold or warm. Maybe I can lay down and fall asleep again, even though I'm gaining elevation at this point. And again, each time I'd wake up 15 minutes later, freezing. I'm like, all right, time to get up and move. I had a micro nap, and then I found another like little like cave rock. I was like, this could be the best spot. 10 minutes later, I wake up, I'm freezing. I'm like, I have no choice. So but I get there and I get to the point of like a crossroad of finally the out path of either deciding like I can try to ascend this mountain, or I can aim here and go up over a mountain passage, just try to get to where my camping gear might be a couple more hours away from me, right? Mm-hmm. So I think about the smart thing, and I'm like, I'm incredibly exhausted. I don't really know where I'm going. I don't know what obstacles I'm going to have. Like, what would I advise somebody else to do in this scenario? And it's like, do not go for that mountain summit. Like, just swallow your pride. It'll be here for another day. Like, go get your sleeping gear. Like, head out, right? So I did that, and it was still like, then I remember finally just walking forever and ever and climbing over stuff and walking and climbing, cold, warm, and then finally the sun starts to come up, and I've never been so excited for the sun to come up. And it was just like, at this point, by the time I got to my sleeping gear, my nap, it was like a 36-hour adventure, and there's probably 30 some miles in there with, I'm not sure, the elevation gain. It was pretty intense. But I only got 2 of the 3 mountains, and it was I would not have been able to get to that point. Like, I needed that if I wouldn't have had Mount Rainier or the 30 hours and all that prior, all the other experience that leads up to seeing, like, pushing your edge, raising your bar a little bit more and more. So long story, but it was my
amazing.
most brutal story.
No, that's true. And I mean, and I love that you have the awareness to know that, like, that one climb kind of fueled your mindset to even be able to think about what you just accomplished in that story. So no, that's incredible.
Yeah. So I learned some lessons in there of, to apply for the next step. So if I will save me some future jams, hopefully, but that just keeps possibly just showing what that's the experience factor and so on. So
that's cool. So once you finish that last mountain, like what did your body feel like at the end of like that last climb? You're at the bottom walking towards your car. Like what were kind of like the feelings that you were having? And then also like the physical toll, like just the recovery that followed that.
So it was interesting. I had to go back into the high Sierra. It was I don't want to go through the whole logistics, but for timing and stuff, I didn't get finished. I didn't get my list finished in Colorado. I thought I would, and I could head to. So the plan was do all of Colorado, go to Mount Rainier in Washington, and finish in California, the last 15. Like, that was the perfect plan. And the only thing I had a hard date was a date on Mount Rainier with some climbing partners because it's more technical, so you need to have a rope team and things. So I had a hard date. I had to be in Mount Rainier. Well, by the time I had to go to Mount Rainier, I still had 1, 2, 3 14ers left at the time in Colorado. So I had to bail on. It's like, all right, I'll go do Mount Rainier. I'll do California. And then my way driving back to Iowa, I can get these other 3 in Colorado. I'll come back. Mm-hmm. Well, what happened was, of course, I changed. I went for 100 mountains. So like I went from Colorado to Washington to California. Just got beat down out there. So much harder. Like, if I would have started in California, I would have gave up instantly. It was so hard out there. But like, I had to do 60 some mountains to prepare for California. Mm-hmm. And so we're up in some tough stuff. I had to bail on some stuff and like swallow my ego. And it was just like, you know what? Take a break, go back to Colorado, build some momentum, get some more summits under your belt, and then come back and finish. So like, I finally came back in early October. I had a climbing partner to go out and get like 3 more, so I had to backpack way back in there. And the reason I say is, like, by the time we got to the final one, again, typical, the sun is setting. We're super far away from camp. But and at this point, my hiking partner, he wasn't nearly as conditioned as I was, right? I'd been doing this for 4 months straight. So right. I'm like a hiking endurance machine, right?
Yeah, you have it down.
Yeah, I have it down. He came from sea level, not the case. Like anybody else, it's like physics, you can't get over that. Anyway, so we're up on the mountain. Like, we finally get to it after like a very long day of doing multiple mountains. We get there and like, I'm excited. Like, this is kind of a big moment for me. It's like the last one on my list. Like, I'm done. Mm-hmm. But I kind of want to celebrate. He's like, all right, we have to get out of here. I'm like, God, I just got to this thing. Like, but nope, watch the sunset. It takes us forever to get back to camp. And I remember hiking out that day, getting back to the car, and there's these 2 old people there. And the one guy was just like, hey, do you want a beer? And I was like, yeah, why not? I was just kind of sitting there. And like all things, it's kind of anticlimactic, right? Uh-huh. I don't know. It's like, yeah, I expected a big party. I don't know what I expected, but it was just like, and it's done. And now I was like, I have to drive again. I'm tired. My body is sore from sitting and driving and stuff. So that was like, I have to drive from California now all the way back to Iowa. And it was weird. It was just like, when you're doing something for 4 months, like just living out of my car every day, is just like hiking and climbing, being in nature. My body, like at that point, wasn't really that sore anymore. I was just conditioned to it, mm-hmm. right? Sure, I benefited from having days off and fully recouping, but the weird part was getting back home. And it was like pulling back into Des Moines, back into my house I was renting. And here I was 4 months later. And the next part's like what you'd call the post-marathon blues of people experience this. Of that is usually people, they'll train for like maybe their first marathon or something. They do a big race event, and then they're kind of slightly depressed afterwards because they train so hard, they have such a high, and then it's just kind of like,
it's over.
It's over. So I had, and it was probably honestly like a 1 to 2 month cycle. It was just really weird. I had a hard time working again, like adjusting.
Yeah,
Just like
but it's a whole different environment too, Calvin.
completely different
You're going
environment.
from like nature and like exciting, and
Yep.
you don't know what the day is going to bring, to like kind of, the everyday routine and like normal clothes. You know what I mean? It's just
Yep. Back in urban
totally,
living.
yep.
So it was just that adjustment part was really interesting. But again, it was the whole last mountain. It was anticlimactic, but it was kind of like, wow, I did this. And at the same time, it only matters to me and nobody else. Like, I was publicizing the journey. So it's kind of cool. Like, seeing my impact may impact others. Like later on, people would send me stories like, hey man, like we went to college together. We haven't talked about what you're doing. You don't know what I'm watching. I love what you're doing. Like,
That's cool.
That's kind of cool because you don't realize the impact or people who are watching, like even if they're not talking or commenting or reaching out, like there's people you may be impacting. Right.
Yeah, for sure.
But for the most part, it's just like, you know what, like excited for people to follow. A month from now, they'll probably forget about it because they're whatever else going on in life, which it doesn't matter. Ultimately, it was about me. It's like, at the end of the day, it's like this accomplishment was just, this journey was for me. And that's all that kind of matters. Like, I don't know, something neat about it. And I got thinking to myself, maybe it's very holistic, but it's like, man, I wonder who else has these same types of experience, like monumental stuff to themselves, whatever the accomplishment may be. It's just like, at the end of the day though, it's just for you kind of thing. And I'm like, this is a pretty special journey in a moment, and it could very well just been a once in a lifetime trip,
Right.
So.
Right. But those kind of like experiences, like they make you so much of a stronger person that you can go out and make a larger impact than you could have ever done without that. So it's really cool. It kind of gives you the credibility, but then it also gives you like just that internal confidence that you can really attack any situation and help so many people.
Yeah. The one key piece that really like solidified that I was going to do this, Casey, was I was revisiting this old blog post by this guy, waitbutwhy.com. Love the guy. And he was just talking about like, he charted out your life like in weeks, like famous people, when they start to accomplish things, like where they're at like weeks and years in their life and so on. But then he whittles it all the way down to like, a chart of 100 years. Like if you live to be 100, like just 100 little bubbles. And then realistically, it's like, well, the average lifespan is around like 80 years old. It's like 79 for men in the US and like 82 for women or something. Right. Mm-hmm. But I was like, and like this may get kind of morbid for people, but it's a realistic, logical approach to look at things. So like I was revisiting this thing. I printed off this chart and I start filling in my own little bubbles, and I get to bubble 29 is the time I'm 29. And I look at this and I think, if I'm going to do something like this, like set out to go hike a bunch of mountains, with the remaining dots on my chart, which I'm at 29, like when would I do something like this? Mm-hmm. And so all of a sudden I look forward to like, say, age 60 on or something. And I was like, well, here I'll probably be retired. I'm going to be older. I may not have the physicality. So like it's not realistic to just put it on the back burner until then. Like that's a long ways away, right? And then I got thinking, I was like, but realistically, I was like, I could perhaps, see myself possibly being more settled down with the family and say by age 35. So, 5 years or so. And so it's like, okay, after that point, it's going to be really hard to leave your kids and family to disappear and live out of a car for 4 months. And to bring them along is probably not going to be easy. So now all of a sudden it wasn't a matter of like, oh, you've got 30 minus 50 some years to figure what year you're going to do this. It's like, let's wheel this down to the next 5 years. Well, then I knew this is like a summer project because the winter would be way more intense and probably not realistic at all, especially from my experience. So now it's like in the next 5 years, these bubbles, I just have the summers, which is only a quarter of the year to choose. And so it came down, it's like, well, if not now, then when? It was ultimately like, now's the best time to do it. Like, because I don't know what's going to, and it came down like, where am I going to be at next year? Where am I going to be in life or aspirations or whatever? It's just like, you know what? Now is the only time, like, you just have to go do it. Like, it was because I had printed that chart out and started filling in bubbles. It was like, I have to go do this. It's like, I knew I could always come back. It was the fear of like leaving my current client work and things. It was just like, at the end of the day, I can come back to all this stuff. I can do this again, but I can't always just leave and go do this. So
yeah. No, that's amazing.
That was the big aha kind of like crowd. So like anyone listening to this, it may sound morbid or whatever, like get in touch with reality. It's really scary, but it's like, find that chart. It's like the chart of a human life or something, like the 90 or 100 years, print it off and start. We all have goals and aspirations that we always think someday. Well, here's the thing. Like the only thing that's guaranteed is today. Like tomorrow's not guaranteed. And, it's all just statistics. Like we may live to be 80 years. But some of us are going to be cut short and some get longer. Like life happens. So
that's true. That chart sounds awesome. Like, and it really is crazy, Calvin. For example, like I just wrote a children's book. I'm doing like a healthy children's book series.
Cool.
And like, I had like a day where I just like wrote down just a bunch of goals that I had. And on the paper, it was like, okay, in 5 years, within a 5-year period, I'm going to write a children's book and like an actual book. Right. And, I was talking to a friend that was like, well, why are you waiting 5 years to do it? And I was like, yeah, you're right. So literally within like the day that I wrote that down to like 3.5 months later, I made a children's book that's on Amazon.
Awesome.
Like, I'm like, but it's just crazy because it's like, I could have put that off until the end of the 5th year, but like, what's the purpose,
Yep.
So it's just, deciding and then making a plan and just realizing that like you can take action and things can happen a lot quicker than you expect if you just make that decision and actually do it. Right.
Yeah. We incredibly underestimate what we're able to do with the time given to us. And it comes down to making that decision, then being disciplined, showing up on a daily basis and doing the work when you say you're going to do the work or when the work is required. I was recently just flying back from an international trip, and on that way home too, I was working on a goal packet. And it was just, thinking about life, and it takes you through the process, like 5-year goals. It's like do 5 year, write down 5 5-year goals, 5 3 years, and 1 year, then 6 months, then like 1 month, 1 week, and 1 day goals, right? And so you do that, and it's kind of fun. It's like, all right, what would I like to do in the next 5 years or 3 years, like in realistic goals, right? But now it's like, all right, now we're going to do the same thing, but now for certain you're going to be dead at the end of that, and It just changes things. It's like, holy shit, 5 years, I'm going to be dead for this day in 5 years. Now what am I actually going to work on? What can I accomplish? And it's like instantly your goals get more realistic, or they get faster, I guess. I can't think of a better term for that. But
more urgent?
More urgent. There you go. Way more urgent. And you're like, by the time you do 5 years, and you get down to like, okay, 1 year, your 3 years are going to die from now. 1 year, 6 months from now, 1 month. And of course, some of your priorities will change, right? And some of your stuff, it goals, they won't. Because it's like, you know what? This ultimately is what brings you happiness, purposefulness, and joy in life. It's like, these are things you want to do. But we incredibly underestimate the things that we can all accomplish. And so, yeah, we should really shorten up our time spans on especially goals and things.
I love that. And Calvin, do you want to go into, because I think it really it plays off what you just accomplished so perfectly about the Join 100 Club that you made, because it's just, you made that decision and you were consistent, and then you created this project called the Join 100 Club. So do you want to talk about what that is, and then how people can join in with what you're doing with that?
Yeah. So the 100 Club you said it so succinctly in the beginning, but it's essentially it's a 100-day commitment for you to take on a goal to either add or subtract something in your life to make your life better daily for 100 continuous days. It's very simple. You decide on what you're going to do, and there's this little chart with 100 boxes, and you fill in a box when you do it. And this was kind of popularized, the whole idea from Jerry Seinfeld, gets a lot of credit for this, of not wanting to break the streak. And someone asked him, like, hey, how'd you become such a great comedian? And he said in his early years, like, of course, you don't become Jerry Seinfeld overnight, like one of the best comedians in the world. He got a big, giant calendar, and he made mandatory he had to write a joke every day. And every day he did it, he put a big, fat, red X on his calendar. And at some point, you start to build it up. You get 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 14, 20 days in a row of X's. And you do not want to break that, because you've seen all the work you've done and you've proven to yourself you can do the work. And so it's like the psychological trick that really works to build momentum. And again, the 100 Club, the chart is I created, it's a feedback loop of the reason why I put the chart together is for my own self. Like, I'm a firm believer in our heads, we have a story that's vastly different than what reality is. At least I found this true with my own goals of, at one point I was charting a lot of goals, like over a 30-day period of like, I want to be biking to the office more, eating healthier. And in my head I had the story. I'm like, oh, I'm doing these things all the time. When I started to write it down and track when I did it, turned out my reporting was much different than the story that I had in my head. So this chart is like, it's the low-tech approach, no fancy app, none of that stuff. You just got to write it down and fill in paper. It's pencil and paper. It's all it requires. And you can look at it and say, are you doing it or not doing it? It's the perfect feedback loop. And Today for this podcast we're recording is actually a perfect day because today on Facebook when I opened up my app, it brought up a memory, and that was 2 years ago. I was on day 2 of my first 100-day commitment, which is what launched this whole thing for me. And I wanted to learn how to do the handstand. And I used this framework to learn that. And I've done like 7 of these things since or something.
That's awesome. So your handstand's pretty on point now.
It's a process. It's always on point is a good thing to say, but there's definitely a lot more work. And now like I envision myself trying to do a handstand, but now it's opened this whole other world of like, now I want to get to one arm hand balancing and more hand balancing stuff. And just like, but first I had to do the handstand. And it's like a catalyst for a lot of other things in my life.
That's awesome.
So, the join100club.com, you can go there. It's just a free thing. Enter your email. You can get the chart and join the Facebook group and follow along in your own 100-day commitment. The only thing I must say, a bit of warning, is some individuals, like all things when we start our goals and hobbies, and maybe it's kind of some of the philosophy behind the 100-day commitment is we get all excited when we start something new. I think of the New Year's resolution thing, right? Mm-hmm. Paradox of people like, I'm going to the gym, I'm going to go hard, and they do it for a week or 2 weeks, and then they miss a day, and 2 days turns into a whole year, right?
Right. And it's easy to do, It's
so easy. And I think some of it comes out of guilt, and it can come from guilt. And we're creatures of habit. But with using the chart, you'll start filling it out, and you'll get some streaks. You'll be feeling really good. And I've watched my own people who've taken on this challenge. They go through the first 10 days, the first row of the chart, and they're excited, and then they start to disappear after that because the honeymoon phase is over. Right. And what may happen is people may miss a day, which turns into 2, which turns into 5. And I don't know if it's a sense of guilt. It's like, oh, I failed on, so I give up. But the point is, it's a decision, a commitment thing of don't give up, because at the end of the day, filling out 51 boxes is better than 49. Like, it's all about improvement, right? So trending up. So keep with it. Like, even if you have we have good streaks, sometimes we have bad streaks, and then recognize that and just pick it back up and continue with the 100 days. Don't give up early. And you'll get results. It's kind of a proven thing.
I agree with you. And I think just kind of the breakthrough of something like that is like, you miss a day, like don't miss the second day. I think that's just like, once you miss, like you were saying, you missed that first day, it's, if you're going to quit, that's when it's going to happen. So it's like, just tell yourself, listen, if I'm human, like if I miss a day, but the next day it's not going to happen. And I think if you do that, you'll be really surprised at what you can accomplish.
Yeah. And I'll promise you, like, even sometimes the quality of your effort may not be as much as the days previously, but what matters is you still do the effort. And like, maybe it means if you're trying to do handstands, that before you go to bed, you practice your 15 minutes of handstands, right? And maybe your quality would have been better if you would have did it in the morning when you woke up, but you're going to feel a whole lot better about yourself if you get that done before you lay down and go to bed. So that way when you wake up, you have a fresh start and say, well, you know what? At least I gave it some effort yesterday, as opposed to no effort.
Absolutely. No, I love that. And I'm excited. I'm going to join it. I got to figure out what I want to do for 100 days, but I will 100% do it. So if you're listening, just join in too, and we can all just do the challenge together. It'll be a lot of fun.
Casey, since you've written a book and you're regardless, children's, adult book, whatever it is, like, it takes effort and it takes a lot of work. And I know there's a lot of people, they often reference people like, oh, I want to write a book in life, but it requires it's a big task. And, a 200-page book is like 50,000 words roughly. And I had a friend who was using this framework, and he realized like he was writing 1,000 words a day. And again, not all of them are going to be good words, but he just sat down, he'd write 1,000 words. And it's quick math. It's that whole, you break things down to a micro level, 1,000 times 100, you're going to have 100,000 words. And if you get rid of half that stuff through editing, and maybe it just wasn't good writing, there you now have a 200-page book that was written over the course in just a little bit over 3 months. And it's like, it's basically done. So again, this thing works for a lot of things. Not saying just writing books for, you can add or subtract things. I've used it before I took a period off of not drinking energy drinks and stuff. And it was just like, I wanted that in my life and I needed it. And it worked. So you can add or subtract things, use it how you wish, but it's pretty straightforward.
No, I love that. And Calvin, is there anything that you're working on else right now that you want to share with people, or just continue to put out content and just share all of the amazing work that you're doing.
Yeah, I guess at the moment it's just putting out content, just do my own thing, trying to focus on what I want to work on. I'm dreaming big for this year. It's not that I took a year off, and compared to climbing 100 mountains, I've taken a year off because that was such a monumental task and goal.
Right.
And of course, now my friends and family see me like, "What are you doing next? Like, what's next crazy?"
Right.
I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm not. It's more about the goal and the commitments than it is about the mountains, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I am scheming something. I'm in the research phase for something of next May, June that I don't necessarily want to state at this moment, but you'll hear about in others if I do decide to go. Right now, I'm just I'm really just trying to work on my body weight fitness, like gymnastics, calisthenics, and a lot of hand balancing stuff.
Nice. No, I love that. And just and then Calvin, what is the best way for people to follow you on social media? That way they can keep up with everything that you're up to.
Yeah, the easiest way is simple. It's just my name, Calvin Johannsen, CalvinJohannsen. And if they wish, also sometimes one of my own goals, maybe I should work on this more, but I have a website called me versus myself.xyz. And it's kind of where I blog and put up either videos or written articles about, philosophy and psychology and experiences in life. So,
awesome. So you have that website, and then you have join100club.com, right? Those are the two?
Yep.
Awesome. Correct. Perfect. And then Calvin, just closing question that I ask every guest, but if you just have one piece of advice for the audience, maybe it's something that's helped you the most on your journey, but if you could just tell the audience just one piece of advice, what would it be?
I'm going to go back to the reality of our mortality, and that is come to terms with that we're just statistics, and perhaps plan for an 80-year life. And what is it, the things that you really want to do, and that someday isn't a day, and choose out what someday is. And think about that often, realize we're all going to die and pass on to the next, whatever the next event is. So tackle those goals and go after those fears and those things you want to do, and use your own mortality as kind of like a deadline for accomplishing and doing experiences that you wish to do in your life.
Right. Just leave that legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love it. And Calvin, just thank you so much for taking the time to come on. I loved having you, and your story is just extremely inspiring. So I'm excited to share that with other people and for them to just check you out.
Cool. Thank you, Casey, for having me.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you loved my conversation with Calvin. His story is extremely inspiring, and I'm excited for you guys to follow him on social media to keep up with everything that he's doing. You can find the social media links that we talked about in the episode and also his websites. You can find those in the show notes, but you can also find them on my website as well at drcaseyjohnson.com. That's DRKASEY Johnson.com. Click on the Listen tab. Then from there, you'll be able to see all of the past guests that have come on the Unlock Wellness podcast, read a little bit more about each guest, and also be able to click on their social media links, their websites, all of that. So all of Calvin's information can be found on my website as well. If you guys loved today's episode with Calvin, be sure to jump onto iTunes, subscribe, and write a review. It really helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate all of the feedback and support. And also, like I spoke about in the intro, be sure to check out my first children's book of my Healthy Children's Book series called Maddox's Trip to the Chiropractor. Each purchase of the book supports the Unlock Wellness Project, which supplies a wellness bag to a child in need for each book purchased. You can learn more about the book and about the Unlock Wellness Project on my website as well at drcaseyjohnson.com by clicking the Shop tab, then choose the Children's Book option. You'll be able to read a short description and even watch a short video to learn more. If you purchase the book, be sure to share it on social media using the hashtag UWProject. I'll repost it and give you a shout out on the podcast. But I hope you guys love the book. Thank you so much for the support, and I hope you loved today's episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in.